boring at home, so my wife and I decided to take a walk. We walked to the tent, grabbed some bottled lemonade, and returned to our yard. The sunset painted everything pink, and a cool breeze set in after a hot day. Rita and I just sat silently next to each other on the bench. Sometimes I would touch her hand, and she would playfully grab my fingers. It was a rare feeling of complete well-being. It seemed like there was no trace of poison in me. But then that annoying Semyon appeared. As soon as I saw him, Rita muttered through her teeth. There he is again, that neighbor who can't just pass by. He always has to pester with questions. He always finds something interesting. Rita openly expressed her dislike for him, not in the most polite manner, and asked him not to smoke near her. He moved slightly aside and asked, "I've been watching you two, and I can't figure out if you're married or not." I clarified immediately, hoping he would ask fewer questions. "We got married 4 years ago," I said. But then he asked about children. "Why don't you have any kids yet?" Semyon flashed his gold teeth, his favorite question to those over 50. In such conditions, having children is self-torture, both for oneself and for the child, I replied, and Rita dug her nails into my palm. She simply didn't want me to engage in a debate with the neighbor. "You'll live in vain for Semyon," I said. Blatant rudeness was the norm in communicating with the destitute. To breed poverty is not in vain. I fell easily into provocation and started getting angry. "You young people only care about money." I raised 2 sons myself, the neighbor scoffed, wearing a worn-out shirt but considering himself a role model. "She'll leave you for someone who wants kids," he added. "And who said I want children?" I replied. Rita couldn't hold back and was ready to argue. I crumpled the plastic bottle, but Semyon seemed unfazed and continued provoking. Perhaps we would have had a fight, but I was distracted by the observer in the distance. Standing behind the garbage containers, an uninvited spectator watched us. I was struck by the appearance of this person. None of his features stood out except his eyes, and he was completely bald. Small nose, thin lips, a faint line of barely noticeable ears pressed to his head. But his eyes, they were the size of chicken eggs. I squinted, trying to understand. Maybe he was wearing some funny glasses. The neighbor muttered something, but I couldn't hear. Then he said, "Well, I'm off," as if we were holding him back. Rita stayed silent. I looked at her, and she was also looking towards the trash can. Her face showed puzzlement. I thought she would ask who it was or something like that, but she remained silent. "Let's go home," I suggested. The idyll of neighborhood gatherings was disturbed. It's better to sit at home where no one bothers us. We lay on the couch, watched a mediocre blockbuster, while our fingers were busy with social media on our phones, and then we went to sleep. It took me a while to fall asleep, and I no longer remembered the foolish neighbors, but I couldn't get the image of that strange bald guy out of my mind, despite my efforts. Thinking about him was unpleasant. I never understood what's wrong with his eyes, Rita suddenly said. "Are eyes like that even possible?" My wife was also thinking about him. I donned. "Yes, that's right," Rita shrugged. "I saw something inside the building earlier." It didn't let me finish my sentence. Of course, I wanted to tell my wife about the guy with the squint from the top floor who was staring at me, but it was almost physically difficult for me to say it. I didn't want to talk about him out loud. "Are you hungry?" Rita asked, not waiting for me to gather my thoughts. "Well, it's a good thing. I would have eaten something," I replied. There are plenty of strange individuals in the world, people with mental peculiarities. Their unusual behavior can be frightening, but most of them are harmless. Besides, they are usually more scared than we are. I reminded myself not to be afraid to encounter this person in the building or the courtyard. I could feel myself getting tense and anxious when I go to work early in the morning. The guy with the squint wasn't on the top floor, and he didn't meet me in front of the building. But as soon as I relaxed, I immediately spotted him. He was standing behind the window of the neighboring entrance. His face was pale with bluish veins around his eyes, red circles like inflammation. I know there are realistic masks, but it seemed to me that this was his real face. Then he wasn't a human, but a living scarecrow. Why did he come to our building? I was going to tell my wife what I saw, but when I came home in the evening, I didn't say a word. Instead, I suggested opening a bottle of wine and playing a board game. We played Mischievous Gnomes, reminiscing about our visits to the board game club, the Red Owl. Unfortunately, the club doesn't exist anymore, but we're still together, enjoying each other's company. Later, Rita finished her glass of wine and said in a hushed voice, "I still haven't told you that yesterday I was sitting there, and it seemed to me that someone was standing behind our door. I had a feeling, so I looked through the peephole, and there he was, that creepy guy with the strange eyes. He stood there frozen. I got scared and wanted to call you, but I didn't. I just locked the door with 2 locks. And you know what's strange? I didn't want to tell you about it. I don't know why, as if it were some kind of dreadful secret." I listened to Rita's words, imagining everything she told me. I had to say something to reassure her or even suggest moving out of here, but my thoughts were stuck. I simply couldn't find the right words to say. We both decided not to continue that conversation. I poured her some more wine and topped up my glass. We resumed our game. I met Semyon earlier that day. His left arm was in a cast, hanging on a strap like a bag. I asked him what happened, and he said he broke his arm. I helped him light a cigarette and tried to find out more details. "Tripped at the doorstep," he said. He was surprisingly laconic. I thought he would talk my ear off about his injury, but Semyon didn't want to discuss it. I also didn't feel like talking to him and headed towards the entrance. Suddenly, the neighbor called out to me with a question. "Hey, have you seen anyone around here?" "Where?" I asked. "Well, I haven't seen anyone here." "Don't understand your hints." Yes, I understood everything. We all wondered about the creature that appeared here, but I couldn't say it outright. Despite my promise, Rita couldn't bear it for 3 days. I was at work when she sent me a message on the messenger, saying, "I'm sorry, I can't stand it anymore. I'm packing my things and leaving. You should leave as soon as possible too. I don't understand how you can stay here." I tried to call her, but I didn't even hear a ring. It turned out she had blocked me everywhere because I couldn't find a new apartment in just a few days. I left work early and went home, but Rita wasn't there, nor were her belongings. She even took her winter clothes so that she wouldn't have to come back here. I was disappointed because we didn't argue for her to leave me like this. Maybe she was afraid I would try to convince her to come back and stay a little longer. I probably would have, but her action still seemed cruel to me. I started seeing the wide-eyed teacher almost every day, mostly appearing in the basement window. When it was time to pay, I told the landlady that I might be leaving soon. She said she was sorry to lose such decent tenants, and she assured me that the apartment would be in order. She didn't want to rent it to just anyone. "What made you decide this?" she asked. "Well, there was a drop of sweat trickling down my temple, and there's this strange guy wandering around the yard, the entrance, even the basement. He looks scary. My wife was so afraid of him that she ran away from home." "Is there a new tenant?" the woman asked. "I don't think so. I'll call the necessary people, and he won't be there." "Why didn't you say it right away?" she replied. After that conversation, I regretted telling her about him. It was embarrassing, as if I had blurted out someone else's secret, something imposed on me, embedded directly into my brain. It happened in the morning. On Tuesday, I went into the entrance and met him as usual. He appeared unexpectedly and made me startle. He stood by the apartment opposite mine, so close. It wasn't a mask, but his skin and eyes, though unblinking, had a fake shine. Without taking his gaze off me, I closed the door and started moving towards the stairs with a hesitant step. The pupils in his huge eyes remained still, but I had a feeling they were still directed at me. My foot missed a step, and I lost my balance, twisting my ankle, hitting my knee, grabbing onto the railing, but still couldn't hold on. I tumbled down the stairs, hurting myself in several places. I sat on the floor, rubbing my bruised knee, and realized that I had done it on purpose. I deliberately stepped into the wrong place to fall. Why did you make me do this, you one-eyed freak? Because I told someone about him. There was blood on the steps. Not mine. Dried droplets under the mailboxes, someone's teeth. I wasn't the first to fall from the stairs. In the evening, I met the guy who lived above me. His face was bruised, and he limped heavily. He hinted at something, and we silently examined each other's bruises and passed by without greeting. When I returned home, I saw my photo on the table. I was young and thin, wearing a ridiculous hat with the inscription "Happy Birthday." It was a photo from 15 years ago when I used to develop pictures. I simply kept it in my phone. Someone took it out of the album and left it on Rita's table. She came by, or that creepy guy was in.